like Google Play Store, App Store, whatever. Okay, and how many of you are making money with that app? Oh, that's true. Well, anyway, hopefully after today or after this presentation, you have some idea how to win, in other words, make actually money with your app by using AI for that. And this all started, I gave a talk at App.js I think it was 2 weeks ago in Poland. And I showed this tweet that I tweeted earlier this year because I was very frustrated with working with React Native, and I was like, fuck that whole thing. Would be probably easier to just ask Claude to build this app in Kotlin and Swift UI instead of trying to get Android ripple animation to work. And it was just like venting out frustration. I didn't think anything would come out of it. But turns out actually a lot of people were like, oh yeah, React Native is gonna die. This guy knows it. So a lot of likes, a lot of comments. And also some people really wishing that I would die, which was my favorite part. Especially because it wasn't like please die, it was like, please buy, killed by AI. So if AI is not killing React Native, it's definitely going for the developer advocates. Well, that was a joke, but there was a truth to it. And it actually started with me talking with a customer, and then I wanted to try that out. And would it actually be more like a better approach to, instead of building with React Native, just take a Swift UI app and build that in Kotlin? And that got me thinking that, okay, AI is actually changing the architecture trait which we've gotten used to in the last 10 years. And I'm gonna say that AI it's evolutionary, it's not revolutionary. And that means that these things are happening, but we're not seeing anything that is actually changing from that much from what we've seen previously. And so when we previously would choose React Native because it was multi-platform by default, allowed us to iterate faster, did smaller teams basically because you didn't need anyone to work on 2 separate apps, and you could ship faster. With AI, you kind of can get rid of all of those. So why would you do React Native? So I took a Swift UI app, converted to React Native and Kotlin, and tested out which one of these workflows, like building just React Native app for iOS and Android, versus Swift UI app and Kotlin app separately, is the fastest, takes the least amount of work, gets the best results. And if you want to know about that, you should watch the talk. So I'm actually just going to skip to the results in that. But if you really want to go into the methodology, all the insights and whatnot, the talk is probably going to be on App.js's side pretty soon, or in their YouTube. So I would watch that. Today we're instead going to more focus on how to actually get to a stage where you're making money with React Native. And before I get into that, the reason why I'm talking about money so much is because that's my job. So I'm a developer advocate at RevenueCat. We make in-app purchases and subscriptions very easy on mobile apps. And my job is literally to help developers make more money, which usually includes all these kinds of things. Before that, I was doing engineering and design, building web and mobile apps. They've had millions of daily active users. So I've built pretty big apps with React Native actually. And I'm still building. Here's 3 apps that I'm currently working on. 2 of these are actually, this gets a bit confusing. The first one there, Swift UI app. The second one here is Swift UI, React Native, and Kotlin app. It actually has all 3 versions of it. And this one is a React Native app. I love working with all of them. So let's get back to the experiment, because that just gives you a little bit of background. So I took this app that I originally built in Swift UI and wanted to try out that you take the great native UI and you get it on iOS and Android. You try all the native stuff and use all the native features. And how do you end up with a good app with agent encoding without knowing, for example, any Kotlin? So I ended up building 4 apps, which actually look pretty decent, and they have all the same features and everything. But you can see maybe minor things. So I think let's try which app is which. And this was actually weird because at App.js, everyone got everything wrong. So, okay, the first one up there. Do you think it's a Swift UI app? If you think so, please raise your hand. All right, 1 person. All right, then between these 2 Android apps, this one here, do we think it's a Kotlin app or a React Native app? Let's say, is this a React Native app? Okay, two hands. You did the exact same thing. So React Native app, it's actually the Swift UI app that for some reason doesn't handle like truncating text correctly. In React Native, the only problem that I actually had was that the time frame was slightly different or slightly wrong. And in Kotlin, the fonts and everything was like completely messed up. And those kind of things actually ended up taking a lot of time. So if I get to the results, once again, what's the talk? This is like a recap of the main results. It took 3 times more tokens, 8 times more prompts, and 2 times more time to convert from the Swift UI app to Kotlin, instead of just building it directly in React Native for both platforms. And there's these like interesting insights that like 80% of the work was like done in a weekend, and then I spent like a week on the Kotlin app and the Swift UI app just polishing stuff that wouldn't get it right on like after multiple tries. There was a lot of duplicate work, so when I eventually started going through the code, I noticed, for example, that on the Kotlin side, a lot of the functionalities for calculating certain metrics and whatnot were just duplicated, because despite it like having the Swift UI code, which had like everything, it would be like, oh, I'll just like go solo here and implement this again. And this coordination thing is the real cause where it actually like really explodes into being like a very complicated way to do things. So the reason why you would now choose React Native is then that you can get rid of those things. They kind of still work, but it's actually the fact that you have less complexity, you have a lower coordination cost, so it's way easier to manage different multiple platforms, especially if you go above 2, because Kotlin and Swift UI, that's 2 platforms if you want web, TV, whatnot. Having React Native there kind of gives you superpowers over the coordination. Then of course consistency. You could already see there that the Kotlin app and the Swift UI app, if you compare them, they're very different. And that's not, in some cases if you're using native features, that's a nice thing. But in most cases, you don't want to go around like duplicating things, duplicating UI interactions and whatnot for every case. That just ends up taking all of your time, and you actually like lose on the polish of the app, which is actually the killer feature. And like you can definitely ship faster by using React Native than using those other 2. If you want to challenge the results or whatnot, what's a talk? There's blog post on my blog as well that goes more into the detail of the like result and insight that I got. So let's actually get into the playbook for winning. So how do we make money with React Native in the age of AI? So the game that we're playing in this case is making money. And of course the question is like, who are we actually competing against? Well, that's every developer on the market. And the reason why we're using money as a way to look at this, if we're winning or not, is because money is a neutral indicator of value. If you build an app and people pay for it, that tells you that your app is valuable. You can of course give it out for free, but usually that kills your interest in actually updating the app, adding new features for it, therefore not making it very valuable in the future. So don't think of money as this like bad thing. Think of it as a neutral indicator of value that you just follow, that are you actually doing work that people value. And the competition is really, really tough. So RevenueCat, we do this like yearly report on subscription apps every year. And this year, for example, we had 115,000 apps on it, like built on different stacks, and they were making 16 billion in revenue in total. So it's a huge data set. And what we noticed from that is that like the divide between like the apps that make a lot of money and the apps that make barely anything is just growing. So 25% of the top apps are making like grew by 80% like in terms of how much money they're making. And the bottom 25% like shrank 33%. And then there, in the middle, there's basically nothing, actually. So what happens in most cases is you release an app, you put it out. If it does not end up making a lot of money, it ends up making barely anything. And that's how the market goes. And just earlier this week, Tim Apple went, like while I was watching the dub.tc, he was like, yeah, we have over 1,000 submissions to App Store every hour. And you're competing against all of those apps as well. Like we can say that AI has definitely like accelerated that thing a lot. So there's a lot of like let's say, low quality slop being shipped to App Store as well. Apple doesn't catch all of that, but you're still competing against them in terms of search terms. If you go and search something in the App Store, if there's hundreds of apps doing the same thing, you're gonna get drowned even if you're the best one at it. And this of course happens with Google Play. Google is not as good at publishing their numbers, and they're probably worse, to be honest. All right, so how do you win in this age of AI when someone can just come and take their Swift UI app and convert it to Kotlin and Token Max and whatever? Well, simple things. So I'm gonna divide this into tech and strategies. And tech part is gonna be the tools that you should be using, in this case, when you're doing agentic development. There's 3 categories, so eyes and hands, closing the feedback loop. That directly challenges the problems I had with the 80-20 problem, that 80% came in a weekend and 20 came in a week. Then we have skills, so we should give the right context to the models. I'm gonna look at some of the skills you should be using. And then native feel is something that I'll slightly touch on in order to convince you that that's the first part where you should start. And then strategies, I'm gonna talk a little bit about monetization. Not too much, enough to get you an idea that if you start building your app, you don't have to figure out this on your own. So let's start with the tech. Eyes and hands, close the feedback loop. So you take your model, your agent, Claude or whatever, and you give it some limbs and modalities, as we would say in cognitive neuroscience. So you give it eyes. You tell it this is what your app is actually seeing, or this is the app that I'm building, take a look at it and do these things. And once you do that, it actually starts to produce way better results. And there's 2 options here. I'd say that they're quite similar, but someone from Colstack probably will challenge me on this, which is fine. We'll argue them in the comment section or at the questions at the end. But what these enable you to do is that your agent can just command your app. There's the agent device from Colstack. You can actually see it working here, adding the contact information, which is kind of cool. Because you can now use your agent to validate that did the changes actually work. And I use this, actually both of these, quite a lot. And then there's also another from Software Mention, the Argent, that kind of does the same thing. You have it there, checking out photo is open, I can see, I can pension. You can do those things. You could also do that, but if you're doing those, what you end up being is like the teacher checking the students' answers. And the problem is that if you're using agents really well, you end up having a lot of students, and that becomes your main job. And that should not be it. You should be focusing more on the things that, okay, we're building this thing, we're validating it works, and getting it to a state that you can ship it out. You don't care about the test results, you care that people are actually learning, getting stuff out that works. So if you have to, if you take anything from these slides in the tech section, take that you install either one of these things, all right? Then, skills. So the thing is, when you're doing agentic coding, no matter what model you use, what happens most of the time is that you tell it to implement something, even if it has the feedback on what it's doing, it goes solo because it has outdated information how to do things. It's not being instructed to do things in a certain way. But then when you take skills into play, so for example, Expo has a lot of packages. This is a subset of those. I think there's 10, 12 already. The main ones that I would use is building native UI. So that follows the platform standards. When you're building on iOS, you get the iOS interaction methods, the iOS components. Same with Android. You don't try to put segmented control from iOS in Android, or what happens in most cases if you ask LLM to do it, they just rebuild the whole component from scratch, which is also a waste of time, never ends up being the user interaction way that user expected to work, and essentially just shit. Same thing, the Jetpack Compose and Swift UI skills. If you use those, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more, please use these, because then they tell your agent to actually use the correct things. And then there's data fetching. And this is actually the thing where I feel that React Native excels the most, because we have a lot of people coming to React Native from web background, which then means that they actually know how to handle offline states very well. And these skills kind of package all of that data fetching stuff into stuff that agents can easily implement. Usually the apps where I've had the best offline experience end up being React Native. And I think it's partially because there's this background of like coming from the web where you might not have a connection, things just might not work. And also the fact, for example, in Swift UI or Swift, if you're using that, is that Apple gives a lot of those by default, and a lot of developers don't end up thinking about them. So when they have a case where it gets a little bit complicated, they don't know about it. And I've validated a lot of like Swift UI skills, for example. None of those take into consideration how to do data fetching from a server, for example, and handle offline, optimistic state, whatnot. But that one does. And then we have RevenueCat has its own AI toolkit. You can take a look at it in the QR code. That one takes, of course, the Expo one. That has a lot of things. It has first of skills, for example, how do I monetize my app? How do I set up products correctly, entitlements, whatnot? But it also has an MCP there. So if you take the full package into use, this thing of setting up products in App Store Connect and Google Play Store, which used to be very complicated, becomes just a simple thing of telling your agents that, hey, I want to monetize my app, add subscriptions. It's a health app, so pick the subscription based on that. And it will create all of those products using RevenueCat's APIs in App Store Connect, Google Play Store, set up the entitlements, set up it so that you have like user subscribes and content gets unlocked. You don't have to think about those things. So it's worth trying, and that's the only thing that I'm going to pitch from RevenueCat today, hopefully. Then the native feel. So I think this is the most important question or topic in a way. And I've been kind of mentioning already multiple times. So if you're building an app, start with like the iOS app, but do not make your own components. Vibe coding, I don't know if you used Roark, Vibe Code. There's a bunch of those tools. I've used all of them. What all of them have been very common is that when you ask them to build an app, they build a web app essentially. It looks like a web app, but using React Native. So you have these weird colors that don't follow the platform standards. You have buttons that don't really feel like iOS buttons, sliders, whatnot. Everything is just like, it feels off. And the reason for that is that most of those vibe coding apps, they don't have like any kind of setup that try to aim for native code level. If you give them like Expo UI as a reference, they suddenly start doing that. And I was like, hey, here's an iOS app that actually follows the standards. You should do the same with your agent. You wouldn't believe how much this matters to the users, that the app feels like it's built for iOS and the app feels like it's built for Android. I know that in React Native, it's very easy to build like similar UI on both platforms, but that's really the case how you actually want to do things. All right, so that then concludes the tech section. Let's look at the strategies. So since not that many of you are making money with your app, I'm gonna take it from the start. So your app needs to make money. And easiest way to do that is ask users to pay for your app. And usually the way you ask for that is by using a paywall. You can see one here, one that I built earlier this week for one of the articles that I wrote. And in this paywall, for example, they can join as a member and they can pick their price. So it was a little bit of a complicated thing. But essentially it's just picking between 5 different subscription levels. And the thing is, like, this all comes down to monetization being a product question. So monetization of app is not a question that the business people in your company should be thinking. It's not the thing like you should be as like, oh, I'll just throw something in once the app is ready. People are gonna eventually buy it when they like have the app. No, like you should design the whole thing in mind that you're gonna make money with this app, and when do I ask the user to pay for that? And that's where it comes to the first question. So the paywall that we just saw there, there's 2 types of it. There's hard and a soft paywall. Hard paywall means that as soon as you open the app, you get the paywall. You don't get to use the app at all. You might get an onboarding, but you don't get to use the features in any way. And a soft paywall, instead, is a paywall that first allows you to use the app maybe to a limited degree or a few times or whatever, and then it prompts itself and it's like, hey, would you like to pay for this and unlock the full experience? And because we have the subscription data from 115,000 apps, we actually did like studies that like which one of these 2 paywalls works the best. And it turns out that hard paywall crushes the software paywall or the freemium paywall, which whatever you want to call it, in conversion. So the way this works is you have an onboarding, people go through it, and you ask them that, hey, before you go into the app, pay for this. And most people actually end up saying, yes, you end up converting to more dollars. And that's because people, when they pay for things, they tend to put more effort into actually trying out the app. If you allow them to test it for free, they'll test it quickly. They don't maybe try the features that you put behind a paywall, and they're like, okay, this doesn't serve my needs, so I don't need it. You put the hard paywall, and they're suddenly like way more willing into trying out your app. But this depends. This depends a lot on like the type of app that you're building. So you should actually test it out. Just don't do this thing that you have soft paywall first, and then later on you switch to hard paywall, because that's just actually going to kill a lot of users, and Apple might even pull your app. Because what happens there is that you promised the users that they get this version of the app for free, and then you put a hard paywall, and suddenly they can't achieve those, use those features. They're going to complain to Apple. Apple is going to compare the two apps and say like, oh, okay, you changed the app midway through without telling the users that this thing is going to change. Banned from App Store, or at least the app is banned. That has happened, so don't do that. So okay, let's say that you've now decided to go with a hard paywall. You're convinced that as long as I start to get users in, they will choose to pay me something. You need a good pairing for that. You need a trial. So no one's gonna buy, I don't know what the saying is, but like we call it in Finnish, it's like big in a bag or something like that. So we don't blindly buy anything. They wanna try it. And you've probably seen this, there's a lot of apps we have this like 3-day trial period. I don't know, like has someone not come across that kind of an app where they have a 3-day trial period? Yeah. That's, for some reason, a lot of app builders really like that, and that's probably the reason, because it looks your monthly recurring revenue look really high for a very short period of time. So, because those charts usually where you have MRR, when people subscribe for 3 days and they convert, they're gonna like immediately, because they forgot to unsubscribe, they're going to cancel the subscription. And what happens also is that if you have a 3-day trial period, is that quite often people will like pay for it, go out of the app before even trying it, and unsubscribe immediately. Like it's like 70% of cancellations, subscription cancellations or trial cancellations happen on day 0, essentially. So effectively, if you want to get people to use your app and you want to get them to actually convert, you would of course hope that they stay as using the trial and subscribe without unsubscribing. And the way you do that is you actually expand the trial length. So if you put it to 14 days, for example, you can see that the biggest one is 10 to 16 days here. That performs the best. Put a trial that is 14 days and you get really good results with people not unsubscribing on first day, but also actually spending time figuring out your app. And then when it eventually converts to a paid subscription, they stay. All right. And part of the things that I've already said is like, they're kind of funny in a way because React Native is already kind of winning in this. If we go back to the stuff that I've shown in the data, those things are in the beginning on like trial lengths and what you should do and so. But the report that we make is like over 200 pages. And if you scroll down the document and you reach to the end, there's my favorite section, which is like cross-platform performance. And I like showing these numbers because usually when people are doing React Native, they really like seeing them because it gives them a way to essentially shut up every other Swift UI, Kotlin, Flutter developer in the world. Because React Native wins in download to paid. That means that after 35 days, there's more users on React Native that are paying than on Flutter, than on native. And that's just the fact of it. I wouldn't say that it's like a causality thing necessarily, but there's an interesting correlation because it actually continues. So React Native also wins in revenue per install. So if you take a Swift UI app and you take a React Native app, the revenue you make from a React Native app is going to end up being higher by a significant margin then it's going to be on a Flutter or the Swift UI app. Which should tell you probably that React Native as a technology is definitely not underperforming over native technologies. And then it also wins in long-term payer value. So it's 50% higher than the nearest one, which is Flutter in this case. The top apps are making significantly more than the top native apps, like $61, $95. And that's if any of the things that I said before didn't convince you, these things should be like 25% higher download to paid than the next competitor, 55% revenue per listen higher, and long-term payer value being also 50% higher. So you build your app with React Native, you tend to have pretty good results. Yeah. And we're now reaching the end. I have only one more thing, because now I've hopefully inspired you to build your app with React Native using the tools that I've talked. We have a pretty cool hackathon. We run every year, at least now 2 years in a row, so this is going to be a third year. And it's the biggest mobile hackathon in the world. This year we're going to have $500,000 in prizes, so you can win a lot of money. We also put your app on the New York Grand billboard there. You can see it there. We're going to buy some other stuff. For example, in Shibuya in Tokyo, you can see your app there on these massive billboards. We'll fly you to New York to get this nice little prize, and then you get $50,000, between $5,000 to $15,000 to $50,000 in prize money. Challenge itself is pretty easy. During August, September, build an app. Can be a React Native app as long as it's in App Store or Google Play Store or Mac Store. You release it during that time, and you add RevenueCat. And essentially, even if you don't end up winning any money, you're still a winner, because now your app is in the App Store. Someone can actually pay for it. You can start making money for it. And one thing, when you enroll in this hackathons, the prize money is nice, getting your app out is nice, but we also have this thing called ShipKit. So we've partnered up with a lot of companies. When you join, you get this packet, it's an email, but it contains tools worth thousands of dollars, different AI tools. Yeah, last year we had Manus, everything. I don't even remember. There was a huge amount of them. So it's worth signing up just to get the ShipKit. Yeah, that's all I have. That's my QR code with my website, where you have the resources and hopefully this talk also later on. And I hope now that you have a lot of questions. And before you put your hands up, I have 2 socks that I want to get rid of. And I'm going to give them out based on who is the fastest at raising their hands. So, but not yet. Talk is officially over now. Okay, that was the first one. Yeah, you there. What is your question?
Oh, no.
Oh, I require a question. Okay, you can try again. Who has a question and raises their hand the fastest gets the first pair of socks? You there. All right. Catch.
I've seen a few talks about the results for React Native. They have been really consistent across the years. React Native outperforms other kind of apps.
Yeah.
Is the trend continue upwards, or is it maintaining because every time I see these slides, I love it, by the way, but is it consistent across the years, or is it growing?
Yeah, so
and what's your prediction?
Yeah, so we've published it now at least 2 years in a row. React Native has been the top performer. So last year's data, or last year's report was based on the data from 2024. So that doesn't really include agentic coding yet. And this year's report is based on last year's data, so 2025, which starts to include agentic coding, but not in the way that we currently have. But during those 2 years, for example, React Native grew in all of those numbers, while most of the others stayed the same. So the difference actually grew. And the question now is, of course, okay, now we have agentic coding, so we're probably going to get a lot of Swift UI apps, a lot of Kotlin apps, and they will start performing as well, really well as well. That's a possibility. But based on what I've been looking at, because we have access to that's not really happening. And what I mean is that the results may still change. We still have a half a year go, and I haven't definitely not gone 115,000 apps by myself for this year. The thing is, like, LLMs have so much more context for React Native apps, especially when you use the skills and the tools, that you by default get apps that are really good out way quicker. And that actually ends up being the defining characteristic of those things. Another thing is that, like, I wouldn't say that there's not necessarily a causality. I have to preface it like this because people always give shit to me that correlation is not causality. Ice cream scores drowning. I don't know if you've ever heard that metric, but it is definitely way more easier to believe that React Native apps make more money because they're better than the ice cream statistics. But what happens is that actually teams that want to build apps that perform end up choosing tools that allow them to do that. And in most cases, that ends up being React Native. And I don't think that's going to change unless you're suddenly going to get like hot reload in Swift UI, because that's one of the things that like LLMs don't do really well. Like in Swift UI, if you're using like an agent, it will build your app, then it will wait, it will go into the app, it will navigate to the page, and it just ends up taking time, context, tokens, and context, and like it's slower. React Native, it makes a change, it takes a screenshot because the view just changed with the view, and it's just faster. And you are also constantly looking at it, you're like, oh, this is what's happened. What happens with me when I'm doing Swift UI is that I really let it run, and then I go and watch YouTube for a second. Then I come back like 5 minutes later, like, oh yeah, it probably finished already. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who does that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm also curious to see the effect of I don't remember the model they included in Xcode, so I'm not sure the Swift apps will get better, at least the early ones.
Claude is pretty good with Swift UI, but it's the feedback loop is definitely way, way longer. Same with Kotlin. So. Other questions?
Who else?
What's you get that one. Wait, I didn't see who was the fastest. But now you have questions. So, huh?
He was the fastest.
He was
I can be the second one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. You won your socks already?
Let me ask the question first. Maybe you will not.
Sure.
Maybe you will not be impressed.
Is that, oh yeah, could be that I just want
I'm just kidding.
Wear the socks.
I'm just kidding. So initially in the conversation, you were talking about your research through Swift UI and then Kotlin and then React Native. Then mid-presentation, you presented some, like the advantages of React Native. Did you find some things in that, for example, Swift UI or Kotlin would bring a significant advantage over React Native, or
yes,
or most of the metrics were in React Native favor?
So what I measured mostly, like the way I did this also, the measuring was like I used Claude's stop hooks, start and stop hooks. And those actually give you like when you started working on a task and when you ended and how much tokens you ended up spending. So I took those as the measurement first. So for me, the most significant measure was speed. And then I went through the code myself to look at the duplication and whatnot. And in those cases, it lost. But where it, for example, performed better. So if I go way back here, you can see this thing. Oh, wow. I had a lot of slides. Come on. There. Make use of Material Design 3, which is the newest version. Mm-hmm. If you look at these apps, they're quite different. And the reason why is that Kotlin handled the Material Design 3 better than React Native. So if you need to be on top of like the newest changes, that usually works. However, it still failed in a lot of cases due to the fact that there's not a lot of Material Design 3 either. The way Flutter has solved this, because in React Native world, you have a lot of context to LLMs to actually absorb and use as a background information. Flutter doesn't have that because people have built way less Flutter apps. So if you do like Flutter agentic coding, you end up seeing that the code is shit and the apps that it builds are horrible. What they did, because like at Google, they realized that, hey, actually, we're kind of losing this thing. They released their own MCP in order to like give the agents the context that they need. Now, if React Native did the same or Swift UI did the same, I think those two things would like immediately trump over Flutter in this case. Same thing with Flutter. Sadly, we don't really have this. Like when I was looking at the skills, Swift UI has a lot of skills. There's a lot of, like, let's say accessibility for one thing. The skills on that side are way better than the ones on React Native, because on React Native you have to keep in context both Android and iOS side when you're doing accessibility. Swift UI, it was only one, and it was like way easier to evaluate the accessibility stuff. But yeah, hopefully that like kind of covers it.
I kind of had the same experience recently, because at Uphold we recently built the app widgets for our app, and we were both using Swift UI and then Kotlin. And building with Swift UI, even from a React Native perspective, was much easier, because I think what you were saying, that the ecosystem for skills, etc., is much more developed. I don't know if it's because more people develop on iOS or something, but on Kotlin, it was still a bit lackluster, I felt.
Yeah. Kotlin seems to be lacking behind, but I also think Kotlin is a weird animal. I don't know how many of you have ever been in an Android conference. That's a good start. But I've been to a lot of them. And Kotlin developers, quite often, if you tell them that this is the easiest way to do something, they're going to be like, all right, I don't really care. I kind of care like how to do the thing and all the like weird nitty-gritty stuff. So good example, we write articles for like all the different SDKs, languages to use. Our Swift UI, React Native, articles always focus on monetization, because that's what gets people to click on them. Our Kotlin articles, they always focus on like, how does the subscription manager .kt file work under the hood? And they like reading those things, but if you tell an Android developer that here's how you make money with your Android app, they're gonna be like, no, I don't care. So I think that's like part of the thing that I feel also like that Kotlin developers are really interested in like the code parts, but not really about the like product parts per se. And if you look at a lot of the skills, what those do is like they package product insights into those skills. They don't really talk about like how to do it technically necessarily. Like if you look at the data fetching thing, that's mostly like, do you like offline state like this? And that's a user experience thing. That's not a like it doesn't tell you like how to do it in code, which the Kotlin people are more expecting. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was my question good?
Yes, you get the socks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Would it be mean to say that no? After all that talk, I was like, no. But no, it's good. And for the other you who didn't get the socks, I have a lot of stickers there, and I would like they're on the table next to the beanies. I don't want to take all of them with me, so take multiple, give them to your kids, grandmothers, whatever, whoever gives a shit about stickers. They're really nice stickers. Yeah. You had a question.
I actually tracked the question because the socks are out. No, just joking. Just joking. So my question was the application, the Kotlin application, Kotlin multi-platform or Kotlin Jetpack Compose?
Which I remember now, because it's been a little bit time, because I did this originally like April, May. But like, supposed to be Jetpack Compose.
Okay.
I considered Kotlin multi-platform, but I have a colleague who's really like, he does the Kotlin stuff. And he's like, Kotlin multi-platform will enable everything. And I felt like, I'll just do it in Kotlin and Jetpack Compose, because then, or like in Jetpack Compose, because then I don't have to hear about the Kotlin multi-platform stuff from him at all. So it was kind of like that.
Okay, it speaks to me better because I would, I mean, I don't have any data to back this idea, but I would assume that Kotlin multi-platform might have a, worse performance here. I mean, the results could be worse because it's newer, so maybe Jetpack Compose is, better established in the data set for the models.
Yeah, might be. And like, it's a new and an upcoming thing. That's how I would put it. That's how I've actually at least seen it. Because last year when we ran Shipathon, JetBrains was one of the sponsors, and their category like, please build us apps with Kotlin multi-platform, because they felt like there wasn't enough of them. So that's how I'm feeling. That's still like taking shape. It's a promising technology, but then again, you also have a lot of multi-platform stuff already, and it's really hard to like challenge those incompetence, I would say.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And if I may have a second question,
Sure.
for the
I have no socks for you, so like.
no worries, I already grabbed that up.js, so I'm full.
Okay.
So maybe the other question with this research, which model or models have you tried?
So, wait, what was May? April, May. Was that already 4.7? I think it was 4.6 then. But
Yeah, probably
yeah.
4.6 only.
But all with the same 4.6 Claude model. Like, wasn't the best. For example, like, well, we have our company like account that I could have done it, but I did it with my personal one, not the 200 one, but the $100 one subscription, and it was enough for me to run those. I don't remember if 4.6 was the one that was like dumb. Was it? 4.7? Okay.
4.7.
So yeah, so it was before it got dumb. I didn't really notice it getting dumber, but I also just like continued using 4.6 so that it would stay the same. And I also tried to use like a lot of the skills and whatnot, because on React Native, because I've been doing that development and Swift UI, I was like, okay, these are getting like a leg up on the Kotlin thing, so I'm gonna try my hardest to find the stuff on Kotlin and just keep everything the same. And the first try, like it took me like 2 weeks to do all of this, and I was like, the results are not gonna be that weird, and it's actually gonna turn out that Kotlin and Swift UI are gonna outperform. Which was like an interesting point, because I had at that point already submitted my talk to app.js and I was like, I do wonder how I'm gonna, like, if it turns out that React Native is shit, how do I rephrase this talk into being something that is actually interesting? So, but yeah.
Okay. Because one thing, of course, this is very interesting, but one thing I'm wondering how to, let's say, follow up on this research would be, what if you would use Gemini or Gemma? Because these models are apparently trained by Google, with Kotlin in mind first. So, of course, I'm a React Native fan just as you. So it carries a risk of the results, but I would be very curious if this would, let's say, improve the matters for Kotlin, if you would use those models, because they are fine-tuned for Kotlin and Android development specifically.
Potentially, but I don't feel like the problems that I came across weren't really about like that, but were actually like the orchestration cost, that I would call it. So I asked it to, like, in some cases I did in 3 different ways. So I had the Swift UI code that I had checked and done, and I was like, okay, that's good code. And then I gave the same code to Claude and said that built the same feature in Kotlin, and it got like the logics part right, but the UI part was like all over the place. Wait, let me check if I can actually. Oh, I can't change. I don't know if I have running the app, but like of these 4 apps, Swift UI is the only one that has charged animations, because on React Native it ended up being like a little bit more painful, and actually ended up like going back to building it differently, because I think it used Victory charts, which looks good, but it's not really the modern choice with charts. On like the Kotlin thing, I don't know where it pulled the charts, but they're horrible. They didn't work. Their rounding is also different, which you can actually see there, because there's like the data in these is a little bit different, because for some reason timeframes ended up being different, despite the Swift UI having like, take these days, every time we talk about 7 days, all the apps had a little bit different, and I don't know what went wrong there in the first result. That's why I took the screenshot, because I find it so interesting that they have the exact same code to look at the logic, but still they're showing like different data points, like 16 clicks, 13 clicks, 13 clicks, and 16 clicks, and I was like, that makes no sense, but all right. But yeah, personally, I don't think like the model really matters for it at this point. And I'm not the only one who got the same results. So there's an episode from React Native Radio from maybe a month ago or 3 weeks ago or something, when they actually talk about like running the same study in like an infinite red, that they took different apps built with Swift UI and Kotlin and doing the conversion instead of building in React Native. And they got the same results of like the 80-20% like thing, and then like the polishing ended up taking like bunch of time. But yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much for the answers.
Do we still have time for questions?
Yeah, sorry, we need to interrupt a little bit, because we just need to. Well, I need to get everyone get the stuff, and we need to close like in 30 minutes to avoid having them to stay too much over time.
That's fine. If you have questions, come talk to me and the other speakers in that room. Take a lot of stickers, please. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So
have a bunch of food over there and coffee.